December 21st, 1939. Somewhere in the frozen forests of eastern Finland. Temperature, minus 43 degrees Celsius. Soviet Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov scans the snow-covered tree line through his binoculars. His company, 120 men, advanced through this forest 2 hours ago. Now only 87 remain. 33 soldiers dead, and nobody has seen the enemy. No gunfire, no explosions, no warning. Just silence. And then, one by one, his men dropped dead. A bullet through the head, every single time. The Soviets are terrified. They call him Belaya Smrt, White Death. They think he's a ghost, a demon, some kind of supernatural force that hunts in the snow. But he's not a ghost. He's a 5'3" farmer from a tiny village who weighs barely 140 pounds. He uses a rifle that most military snipers would laugh at. No scope, no advanced technology, just iron sights and a weapon that's older than he is. His tactic is so simple that Soviet commanders call it stupid, impossible, and peasant superstition. But in just 100 days, this one man will kill over 505 Soviet soldiers. 505 alone, in conditions so extreme that most people can't survive, let alone fight. The Soviet Union will send entire counter-sniper teams to hunt him. They'll send artillery strikes specifically to kill one man. Stalin himself will demand his death, and they will all fail. This is the story of Simo Häyhä, the deadliest sniper in human history, and the stupid tactic that made him invisible.
Let me take you back to November 30th, 1939. The world is watching Germany invade Poland. Everyone's focused on the beginning of World War II in the West. But in the frozen North, something else is happening. Something that historians will later call one of the greatest military blunders of all time. The Soviet Union invades Finland. Now, on paper, this should be easy. The Soviet Union has 190 million people. Finland has 3.7 million. The Soviets have 6,000 tanks. Finland has 32. The Soviet military has over 1 million soldiers ready for invasion. Finland can mobilize maybe 300,000 at most. Joseph Stalin looks at the map and thinks this will take 2 weeks, maybe 3. Finland will surrender before Christmas. He is spectacularly wrong. Because Stalin makes a fundamental mistake. He assumes that numbers are everything, that technology wins wars, that a modern mechanized army will crush a smaller, less equipped force just by showing up. He doesn't understand Finland. He doesn't understand the terrain. And he absolutely doesn't understand the Finnish people. Finland is not like other countries. It's not flat plains or open fields. It's dense forest, frozen lakes, and swamps that turn into ice fields in winter. The temperature drops to minus 40 Celsius, sometimes colder. It's so cold that metal becomes brittle, engines freeze, and exposed skin develops frostbite in minutes. The Soviets are equipped for a modern war. Tanks, artillery, aircraft. But their equipment isn't designed for this kind of cold. Their tanks get stuck in snow. Their vehicles won't start. Their soldiers, many from Ukraine and southern Russia, have never experienced cold like this. The Finnish soldiers? They grew up in this. They hunt in these forests. They ski to school. They know how to survive in conditions that would kill most people. But even with home field advantage, the odds are overwhelming. The Soviet First Army alone has 425,000 soldiers. They're pushing into Finland from multiple directions, expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they walk into hell. The Finnish military strategy is simple. They can't win a conventional war, so they won't fight one. Instead, they'll use the terrain. Small, mobile units on skis. Hit-and-run tactics. Ambushes. Make the Soviets pay for every kilometer. They call it Matti tactics. Surrounding and isolating enemy units, cutting them off from supply lines, and letting the cold do most of the killing. And it works. Better than anyone expected. In the first 2 weeks of the war, Finnish forces destroy entire Soviet divisions. The Battle of Suomussalmi, 4,000 Finnish soldiers against 25,000 Soviets. The Finns win, decisively. Over 23,000 Soviet casualties. The Soviets are panicking. This was supposed to be easy. Instead, they're losing thousands of men to an enemy they can barely see. That's when Simo Häyhä enters the story. Simo was born in 1905 in a tiny farming village called Rautjärvi, right on the Soviet border. He wasn't a professional soldier. He wasn't even particularly interested in the military. He was a farmer. He grew potatoes and wheat. He hunted elk and rabbits in the forest to supplement his family's food. But Simo had one unusual skill. He was an extraordinary marksman. He'd been hunting since he was a child. In Finland, hunting wasn't a hobby. It was survival. You needed meat for the winter, and ammunition was expensive, so every shot had to count. Simo developed a reputation in his village for being able to hit targets at distances that seemed impossible. When Finland mobilized for war, Simo was drafted into the 6th Company of the 34th Infantry Regiment. He was 33 years old, ancient by infantry standards. Most soldiers were in their early 20s. His commanding officer looked at him, this short, quiet farmer who barely spoke, and almost sent him to logistics. But someone mentioned that Simo could shoot. They gave him a test. Standard marksmanship qualification. 150 meters. Hit 10 targets. Simo hit all 10 in under 45 seconds. The officer blinked. Do it again. Simo did it again. Same result. They moved the targets to 300 meters. Simo hit them all. 400 meters. All hits. At 500 meters, a distance where most soldiers couldn't even see the target clearly, Simo was still hitting consistently. His commanding officer made a decision. Simo Häyhä would be a sniper. Simo was given a rifle, but not a modern sniper rifle with a scope. The Finnish military didn't have many of those. Instead, he got a Mosin Nagant M2830, a Finnish modified version of an old Russian rifle. It was reliable, accurate enough, and simple. And Simo refused to attach a scope to it. This decision would define everything that came next. When Simo Häyhä told his commanding officer he didn't want a telescopic sight, the officer thought he was joking. "Häyhä, you're a sniper. You need a scope. That's what snipers use." Simo shook his head. Iron sights. "That's stupid. You'll be at a massive disadvantage. Soviet snipers have scopes. You'll be outranged, outmatched. Iron sights," Simo repeated. The officer couldn't understand it. Every military in the world was moving toward scoped rifles. Scopes gave you better accuracy, longer range, better target acquisition. Not using a scope was like refusing to use a car and insisting on walking instead. But Simo had reasons, very good reasons. First, scope glint. A telescopic sight has glass lenses. When sunlight hits those lenses, even weak winter sunlight, they reflect. That glint can be seen from hundreds of meters away. It's like wearing a sign that says "Sniper here." Soviet counter-snipers were trained to look for scope glint.
That little flash of light would give away your position instantly. Iron sights? No glass, no reflection, no glint. Second, height. When you use a scope, you have to raise your head higher to look through it. Your face is more exposed, your profile is larger. In snow, where concealment is everything, even an extra 2 centimeters of exposure can get you killed. With iron sights, Simo could keep his head lower. His silhouette was smaller. Third, cold. At minus 40 Celsius, everything behaves differently. Optical glass can fog up from your breath. The scope mechanism can freeze. Adjustments become difficult with frozen fingers. Iron sights? No moving parts, no glass to fog. They just work. But the real genius of Simo's tactic wasn't the iron sights. It was everything else he did. Simo developed a method, a routine that he followed religiously on every mission. Other snipers thought it was superstitious nonsense. Soviet commanders who learned about it called it peasant stupidity, but it made him nearly impossible to find. Here's what Simo did. Step 1. The snow bed. Simo would arrive at his position hours before dawn, sometimes the night before. He'd find a spot with good visibility but minimal exposure, usually at the base of a tree or behind a snowdrift. Then he'd dig. Not a trench, nothing obvious, just a small depression in the snow, barely enough to lie down in. He'd pile the excavated snow around the edges, creating a natural-looking mound that blended with the terrain. Other snipers would dig elaborate foxholes. Simo's position looked like a random drift of snow. Step 2. The water trick. This is the part Soviet snipers couldn't figure out. Whenever you breathe in extreme cold, your breath creates steam. That steam is visible, especially against a background of white snow. It's a dead giveaway. Soviet snipers would try to breathe slowly or breathe through cloth to diffuse the steam. It helped, but not enough. Simo had a different solution. He kept his mouth full of snow. Literally, he would pack his mouth with snow and let it slowly melt. When he breathed, the moisture from his breath would condense on the snow in his mouth instead of creating visible steam in the air. Yes, it was painfully uncomfortable. Yes, it made his face numb, but it made his breath invisible. Soviet soldiers would scan the tree line looking for that telltale puff of steam that indicated a hidden sniper. With Simo, there was nothing. Step 3. The ice barrier. Here's another problem with winter sniping. When you fire a rifle, the muzzle blast kicks up snow. Even a small amount creates a visible puff that shows your exact location. Simo's solution? He'd pour water in front of his rifle position. The water would freeze almost instantly in the extreme cold, creating a thin sheet of ice. When he fired, the muzzle blast would hit the ice instead of loose snow. No visible snow cloud, just a tiny crack in the ice that was almost impossible to see from a distance. Step 4. Minimal movement. Simo would remain in position for 6, 8, sometimes 10 hours straight in minus 40-degree weather without moving. Most snipers would shift position every few hours to stay warm, to keep blood flowing, to avoid frostbite. Every time they moved, there was a tiny risk of being spotted. Simo didn't move. He'd trained his body to tolerate the cold. He wore multiple layers of white winter camouflage. He'd wrap his rifle in white cloth. Even his face was covered except for his eyes. From 50 meters away, he looked like another snowdrift. Step 5. The sun position. Simo always positioned himself with the sun behind him. This meant Soviet soldiers looking in his direction would be looking into the sun. Even weak winter sun creates glare. Their eyes would hurt. Their vision would be impaired. Meanwhile, Simo had perfect visibility. His targets were lit by the sun, making them easier to see and identify. This combination of tactics, no scope glint, minimal profile, invisible breath, no snow signature, perfect stillness, optimal sun position made Simo effectively invisible. Soviet soldiers called him White Death because they couldn't see him. He would kill their comrades, and they had no idea where the shots were coming from. Men would drop dead, and there would be no muzzle flash, no sound delay, no visible indicator of the shooter's position. It was psychological warfare on a level the Soviets weren't prepared for. And Simo was just getting started. December 1939, Simo Häyhä's first week as a combat sniper. His unit was assigned to defend a sector near the Kola River. Soviet forces were pushing hard, trying to break through Finnish lines and capture the critical road junction beyond. The Soviets were advancing in large formations, company-sized units, sometimes 150 to 200 men. They assumed strength in numbers would overwhelm the small Finnish defensive positions. They were wrong. Simo's commanding officer gave him simple orders: slow them down, make them afraid. On December 6th, Simo took his first shot in combat. A Soviet officer, 300 meters away, was organizing his men for an advance. Simo had been in position for 3 hours, watching the Soviets prepare. He breathed out slowly, snow in his mouth, ice in front of his rifle, sun at his back. He squeezed the trigger. The Soviet officer dropped instantly, headshot, dead before he hit the ground. The Soviet troops panicked. They scattered, looking for the shooter, but they couldn't see anything. No muzzle flash, no visible position, just white forest and snow. Simo didn't move. He waited. 30 seconds, 1 minute, 2 minutes. The Soviets regrouped. A sergeant stepped forward to take command. Simo fired again. The sergeant fell. Another headshot. Now the Soviets were terrified. They started firing randomly into the tree line, wasting ammunition on invisible enemies. Some tried to advance. Simo shot 3 more soldiers in quick succession, all headshots, all at ranges over 250 meters. The Soviet advance stopped. The survivors retreated. In 15 minutes, Simo had killed 6 soldiers and completely halted an advance by a company of 180 men. His commanding officer couldn't believe it. "Häyhä, how many did you get?" "6, Simo replied quietly. He was already cleaning his rifle. "6 confirmed?" "Yes, sir." That was day 1. By the end of December, 25 days of combat, Simo had killed 138 Soviet soldiers. 138 in less than a month. The Finnish military had never seen anything like it. The average sniper was considered effective if they got 20 to 30 kills in an entire war. Simo was averaging 5 kills per day. But here's what made Simo truly exceptional. It wasn't just the numbers, it was how he achieved them. Most snipers would take a shot, then immediately relocate to avoid counterfire. Standard procedure: don't stay in one place after revealing your position. Simo didn't relocate, he stayed put. Why? Because relocating meant movement. Movement meant tracks in the snow. Tracks meant Soviet scouts could follow them back to Finnish positions. Instead, Simo would take his shots, then go completely still. If the Soviets returned fire, he'd wait it out, hours if necessary. He'd let them waste ammunition shooting at empty forest. Then, when they thought it was safe, he'd shoot again. This drove the Soviets insane. One Soviet commander wrote in his diary, later captured by Finnish forces, "There is a Finnish devil in Sector 7. We sent 40 men this morning. Only 28 returned. We never saw the enemy, not once. How do you fight a ghost?" Soviet morale was collapsing. Soldiers refused to advance in certain sectors because they knew White Death hunted there. Officers had to threaten their own men with execution to get them to move forward. And it wasn't just Simo's kills that mattered, it was the psychological effect. Every Soviet soldier in the sector knew about White Death. They'd heard stories. A sniper who never missed, who killed officers first, who could shoot through blizzards, who disappeared into the snow like magic. The stories were exaggerated, of course, but enough of them were true that Soviet soldiers lived in constant fear. They couldn't sleep. They couldn't relax. Every time they moved, they wondered if they were in someone's crosshairs. The Finnish High Command started getting reports from other sectors. "Can we get Häyhä? Our section is under heavy pressure. We need him here." But Simo stayed at Kola. His unit needed him, and the killing continued. By mid-January 1940, Simo's confirmed kill count was over 200. 200 Soviet soldiers in less than 2 months. The Soviet High Command couldn't ignore this anymore. This wasn't just a sniper problem, it was a strategic disaster. One Finnish farmer was tying down entire Soviet units, creating casualties at a rate that was statistically impossible. They needed to stop him, and they were willing to try anything.
January 1940, Soviet headquarters, Leningrad. A special meeting was called. Subject, the sniper problem in the Kola sector. Present, 3 generals, 4 colonels, and the head of Soviet military intelligence. The intelligence officer presented his report. Based on Finnish radio intercepts and survivor testimonies, we believe a single enemy sniper, possibly named Häyhä, has killed between 200 and 250 Soviet soldiers in the past 6 weeks. One of the generals laughed. "That's impossible. One man can't kill that many soldiers in that time frame. Your intelligence is wrong." "Sir, we've confirmed it through multiple sources. Finnish soldiers refer to him by name. Our own survivors describe identical tactics." "I don't care about tactics," the general shouted. "Send counter-snipers. Send a dozen of them. Kill this man and end this embarrassment." They did. They sent an entire counter-sniper platoon, 12 of the Soviet military's best marksmen, equipped with scoped Mosin Nagant rifles, sent specifically to kill Simo Häyhä. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were professionals, men with 50-plus kills each, men who'd been shooting competitively since childhood, men who'd trained for years specifically to hunt other snipers. They arrived at the Kola sector in mid-January, confident they'd solve the problem in a week. 3 days later, 6 of them were dead. 2 more were wounded. The remaining 4 requested immediate transfer out of the sector. What happened? Simo had been watching the Soviets for weeks. He knew their patterns. He knew where they advanced, where they positioned their officers, how their supply lines worked. When the counter-snipers arrived, Simo immediately identified them. They were too careful, too deliberate. They moved like hunters, not regular soldiers. So Simo waited. He didn't take any shots for 2 days. He let the counter-snipers position themselves, set up their hides, get comfortable. Then, on the 3rd day, he started hunting them. Counter-snipers are trained to look for specific things: scope glint, muzzle flash, movement, breath steam, disturbed snow. They're good at finding hidden snipers. But Simo had no scope glint. His muzzle flash was minimal and obscured by his ice barrier. He didn't move. His breath was invisible. His snow position looked completely natural. The Soviet counter-snipers were looking for a sniper who followed normal sniper procedures. Simo wasn't normal. The first counter-sniper died at 11:37 a.m. on January 18, 1940. He'd been in his position for 6 hours, scanning the tree line through his scope, looking for any sign of the enemy. He never saw Simo. He just died. A single bullet through the head. His body slumped forward, and his partner, positioned 50 meters away, didn't even realize he was dead until hours later when he didn't respond to signals. The second died that afternoon. Same method.
No warning, just sudden death. By the end of the third day, the Soviet counter-sniper team was in full retreat. They couldn't find him. They couldn't kill him. They couldn't even make him move. The Soviet command tried a different approach: artillery. If they couldn't shoot him, they'd blow him up. They brought in artillery units and started shelling the entire forest sector where Simo was believed to operate. Not targeted strikes, carpet bombing. Hundreds of shells destroying square kilometers of forest. Trees were shattered, the ground was torn apart. Everything that could burn was burning. It was overkill on a scale rarely seen in warfare. Using artillery were thousands of rubles to kill one man. When the bombardment ended, the Soviets sent scouts to confirm the kill. 3 days later, Simo shot 7 more soldiers. He'd survived by going deeper into his snow position. The bombardment had been terrifying, shells landing all around him, trees exploding, shrapnel everywhere. But he stayed still, stayed low, and waited it out. When the shelling stopped and the Soviets assumed he was dead, he resumed his work. The Soviet commanders were running out of options. They tried everything. Sending large patrols to sweep the area, Simo would hide and let them pass, then shoot stragglers. Using dogs to track him didn't work in heavy snow, and Simo would shoot the dog handlers first. Offering rewards for his capture, no one could even find him, let alone capture him. Sending infiltration teams at night. Simo didn't hunt at night, he'd retreat to Finnish lines after dark. Nothing worked. By early February, Simo's kill count was approaching 400. 400 Soviet soldiers, in just over 2 months. The Soviet military had never faced anything like this. One man, one small farmer with a basic rifle and no scope, was creating casualties at a rate that required an entire company to match. Soviet morale in the Kala sector was destroyed. Soldiers were deserting. Officers were requesting transfers. Nobody wanted to be sent to the sector where White Death hunted. Finnish propaganda made it worse. They started spreading stories about Simo, some true, some exaggerated. They said he could shoot a cigarette out of someone's mouth at 400 meters, that he'd killed 500 men, that he was invisible, immortal, unstoppable. They believed it, because nothing they did could stop him. But the clock was ticking. The war couldn't last forever, and Simo knew that every day he fought, he was pushing his luck. On March 6, 1940, his luck ran out. March 6, 1940. Day 98 of the Winter War. The war was ending. Both sides knew it. Finland had fought brilliantly, but they couldn't sustain the casualties forever. Peace negotiations were underway in Moscow. Everyone expected a ceasefire within days. Simo Häyhä had killed 505 confirmed Soviet soldiers, 505, in 98 days, an average of more than 5 kills per day every single day for over 3 months straight. He was exhausted. He'd been fighting in sub-zero temperatures for so long that he'd lost 15 pounds. His body was shutting down from constant cold exposure and stress. His commanding officer had tried to order him to rest. Simo refused. "The war isn't over," he said quietly. "I'm still needed." March 6th started like many other days. Simo moved into position before dawn. Same routine, same tactics. The Soviets were making one final push before the ceasefire, trying to capture as much Finnish territory as possible to improve their negotiating position. Simo's sector was under heavy assault. Soviet forces were advancing with everything they had: infantry, armor support, artillery. Simo took his position at the edge of a frozen lake, good visibility, clear fields of fire. He could see Soviet troops massing in the tree line 300 meters away. He began shooting. First shot, Soviet officer, dead. Second shot, machine gunner, dead. Third shot, radio operator, dead. He was firing faster than usual. The Soviets were advancing quickly, and he needed to disrupt their assault. His shots were still precise, every one a kill, but his rate of fire was higher. Fourth shot. Fifth. Sixth. The Soviet advance stalled. Soldiers hit the ground trying to find cover. Officers were screaming orders. Chaos was spreading through their ranks. Simo reloaded. Seventh shot. Eighth. And then, without warning, the world exploded. A Soviet soldier, later identified as an infantryman with no special training, fired a rifle in panic. He wasn't aiming at anything specific. He was just shooting at the general area where he thought the sniper might be. The bullet hit him in the face. It entered through his left cheek, traveled through his jaw, and exited through the right side of his head. The impact was catastrophic. Bone fragments shattered, teeth were destroyed, half of his face was simply gone. Simo collapsed in his snow position. Blood poured from the wound, turning the white snow crimson. His spotter, a young soldier positioned 20 meters away, saw him fall and immediately called for help. But they were in an active combat zone. Medics couldn't reach him immediately. For 20 minutes, Simo Häyhä lay in the snow, bleeding to death while battle raged around him. His spotter stayed with him, applying pressure to the wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me, Simo. Medics are coming. Just hold on." Simo was conscious, in unimaginable pain, but conscious. He couldn't speak. His jaw was destroyed, but his eyes were open. Later, his spotter would say, "I've never seen that much blood. I thought there was no way he could survive, but he kept looking at me, like he was refusing to die." Medics finally reached him during a brief lull in the fighting. They looked at his wound and immediately prepared for the worst. Injuries like this were almost always fatal. If the blood loss didn't kill him, infection would. And even if he survived, he'd never be the same. They carried him back to a field hospital. 3 kilometers through snow, under intermittent fire, with Simo drifting in and out of consciousness. At the field hospital, doctors examined the wound. It was catastrophic. The bullet had destroyed most of his lower face. Reconstructive surgery wasn't really possible with 1940 medical technology, especially not in a wartime field hospital. They did what they could, stopped the bleeding, cleaned the wound, and gave him morphine. Then they waited. Simo fell into a coma. The doctors gave him a 5% chance of survival. Most patients with these injuries died within 48 hours from infection or complications. But Simo didn't die. He remained in a coma for 7 days. During that time, the Winter War ended. Finland and the Soviet Union signed the Moscow Peace Treaty on March 12, 1940. Finland lost territory but retained independence. The Soviets had failed to conquer the country. Simo Häyhä, the White Death, the deadliest sniper in human history, woke up on March 13th, the day after the war ended. He couldn't speak, couldn't eat solid food. His face would require years of reconstructive surgery and would never look the same. But he was alive. The first thing he did when he regained enough strength was ask for a pen and paper. He couldn't talk, but he could write. He wrote one word. "Victory?" A nurse nodded. "Yes, we won. The war is over." Simo closed his eyes and went back to sleep.
Simo Häyhä survived. Against every medical prediction, against all logic, he survived. His recovery took over a year, multiple surgeries to reconstruct his jaw, dental work that was primitive by modern standards, physical therapy to regain the ability to eat and speak. When he could finally talk again, his voice was different, raspy, quiet,
harder to understand. The left side of his face remained partially paralyzed for the rest of his life. But he was alive. The Finnish government promoted him to second lieutenant, a battlefield promotion for extraordinary service. He was awarded the Medal of Liberty, Finland's highest military honor. Foreign governments sent commendations. The Finnish people celebrated him as a national hero. But Simo didn't want to be a hero. He just wanted to go home. In 1941, after his recovery, he returned to his village, back to the same small farm where he'd grown potatoes before the war. He rebuilt his life quietly. He hunted elk in the same forests where he'd killed 505 Soviet soldiers. He never spoke about the war unless directly asked. Reporters would occasionally find him. They'd ask, "How did you do it? How did you kill 505 men?" Simo's answer was always the same. "I did what was necessary, nothing more." But your tactics, the snow in your mouth, the ice barrier, the iron sights, those were genius innovations. Simo would shake his head. Not genius. Common sense. I was a hunter before the war. I hunted elk the same way. You don't let the elk see you. You don't let them smell you. You shoot from positions they can't detect. It's not complicated. But it was complicated, because nobody else did it the way Simo did. Soviet snipers with better rifles, better training, better equipment, they couldn't match what a Finnish farmer accomplished with a basic rifle and pure determination. In the decades after the war, military academies studied Simo's tactics. His methods became part of sniper training doctrine in multiple countries. The White Death techniques, minimizing your signature, using terrain intelligently, maintaining perfect patience, are now standard procedure. But here's what's truly remarkable. Simo's 505 confirmed kills are just the kills he made as a sniper. Records show he also killed approximately 200 more Soviet soldiers using a submachine gun during close quarters combat. That's over 700 total kills in 98 days of combat. To put that in perspective, the second deadliest sniper in history, depending on which records you trust, is either Ivan Sidorenko, Soviet, with 500 kills, or Fyodor Okhlukov, Soviet, with 429 kills. Both of them fought for the entire duration of World War II, 4 years. Simo fought for 98 days. His kill rate was statistically impossible, and yet it happened. Simo Häyhä lived until 2002. He died at age 96, peacefully, in his sleep, in the same village where he was born. He never married. He spent his final decades hunting, fishing, and avoiding attention. When asked, late in his life, whether he regretted killing so many people, Simo gave an answer that silenced the reporter. "I did what was necessary to protect my country and my people. Those Soviet soldiers were invading Finland. They would have killed Finnish civilians. They would have destroyed our independence. I stopped them. That's all." "Do you feel like a hero?" the reporter asked. "No," Simo said simply. "Heroes are people who save lives. I took lives. I'm not proud of that, but I'd do it again if I had to." Today, there are monuments to Simo Häyhä across Finland. The Finnish military honors his memory. His rifle, the same Mosin Nagant M-28-30 he used during the war, is displayed in a military museum. And if you visit Finland and talk to the older generation, they'll tell you stories about White Death, about the farmer who became a ghost, about the man who stopped an army with nothing but iron sights and determination. The Soviets never forgot him either. Even today, In Russian military history, there are references to Belia Smert, White Death, sometimes respectfully, sometimes with lingering fear. Because Simo Häyhä proved something that modern militaries don't like to admit. Technology doesn't always win. Numbers don't always win. Sometimes one person with the right skills, the right tactics, and absolute commitment can change the outcome of a war. The Soviet Union invaded Finland with 1 million soldiers, thousands of tanks, and overwhelming superiority in every measurable category. One farmer with a rifle stopped them. That's not a story. That's history.
The Winter War ended 85 years ago. The Soviet Union no longer exists. Most of the soldiers who fought in that frozen conflict are gone. But the legend of Simo Häyhä remains. Because his story isn't just about killing. It's about what happens when ordinary people are pushed to extraordinary circumstances. Simo wasn't a professional soldier. He wasn't specially trained. He wasn't genetically superior or uniquely gifted. He was a farmer who refused to let his country be conquered. And when the experts told him his tactics were stupid, when Soviet commanders dismissed his methods as peasant superstition, when everyone said it was impossible, he proved them wrong. 505 times. The next time someone tells you that the proper way is the only way, that you need expensive equipment or official approval or conventional methods, remember Simo Häyhä. Remember the man who killed 505 enemy soldiers with iron sights. Remember White Death. If you want more stories like this, drop a comment about which World War II hero you'd like to hear about next. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories from history that changed the world.